an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 148 and 149. In these episodes, we wind up with the descendant of a man called Nolan the Liar. And this dude, Nolan, claimed to have found like a island covered in gold. And then they couldn't find it again. And they called him a liar. And they executed him. And considering how unreliable navigation in the Grand Line is, I think that's a tiny bit of an overreaction. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. And no thank you to everybody in the chat who is trying to convince me to get a second monitor. I was just whining once again about Hulu not cooperating with me going in and out of tabs. And yeah, y'all are just bad influences who want me to spend more money, and I don't need encouragement to spend more money. I just don't. I do it anyway. Florian says, this one is sponsored by Michael. I bought it because he's always at work when the slots opened up. He paid me back. All right. Well, thank you, Michael. Appreciate you. Probably said that in the notes, and I just saw the name, and I didn't even see that. Yep. It says Michael S. My apologies for not reading the notes. Thank you, Michael. So the last episode of coverage, I was pretty frustrated, as you guys remember. Just kind of feeling like things were all over the place. The narrative wasn't as direct as it tends to be usually. And the premise of the bad guy here, Bellamy, is sort of weak. In my opinion, it's just I don't like people who dream. I can't believe that somebody who is just a dreamer would get this gold. They can't have it. And personally, I don't really buy it. It doesn't a lot of the other stuff makes total sense, where we've got people who are just obsessed with power. They're obsessed with money. They just want to be number one. Fine. But the whole I just don't like dreamers is so odd. It would feel a little bit more appropriate if they decided to make Bellamy sort of an uptight kind of guy, somebody who's so hyper practical that the idea of believing in things that aren't proven would feel like a waste of time, a waste of resources, and sort of very childish. But Bellamy just feels like a regular old thug who isn't distinguished in a particular way. And the gimmick here for him just not liking dreamers doesn't feel like it's really connected to his personality in a way that makes sense to me. And considering that his whole thing here is, I'm going to go after this gold that is rumored to be somewhere, that is pursuing a dream. So it feels contradictory within itself, And I stand by all of that, especially because last episode Bellamy has a lot more to do with what's going on. This episode, though, we get some new people showing up, and we get a really weird home. So we go to Mont Blanc Cricket's place, which is where this rumor of gold leads several people, as it turns out. And Mont Blanc's got this weird facade on the front of his home to make it look like this giant palace. I really love, and this just keeps being a thing, I really love how there are certain people who react to this as if it's really impressive, and then there are certain people who are that is ugly as fuck, though. Come on. Yeah, it's a big palace, but this guy has no taste. And for the record, that second was Sanji. I think also Zoro. And I believe that it's a huge house and it's a palace are Usopp and Luffy. And this is something that I particularly enjoy watching in action because I have been with groups of people who respond really, really differently to displays of wealth. And I feel like it can be very telling, not necessarily about like their priorities, like, because oftentimes, even if somebody admires something because it looks hugely expensive, if they were put in the position of spending the money on the same thing, from what I have seen of my friends, they would not make the same choice. But the things that impress you, those can tell you a lot about somebody's personality, you know? And for me, I have never been somebody who is, quote, impressed by things that are clearly expensive. I might be envious, or I might be a little bit overwhelmed when I stop and think about how much money actually went into the thing. That's something that I experienced a lot when I was planning a wedding. But, you know, you have these moments where you think back on a wedding from like a movie, or maybe a wedding that you went to that was beautiful, and you really now are looking at how much they probably spent on like flowers, and you go, oh my God, that was like $11,000 worth of flowers, only the flowers. But if you manage to make something really beautiful, that is the thing. You don't need a lot of money to do that. You just have to be really careful. And that is something that I have learned in life, that I can, like, if I am really choosy about what I put together, I can make something look very expensive, but I have to be extremely selective about what I put into that, you know? And this dude's house is like this little sort of very regular looking hut that is behind this giant, like really bombastic sort of facade. Yeah, Gus says, it's the same palace from Nolan's Homeland that's illustrated in the book, I think. Yeah, I thought that was what was going on there. I do find it a little weird that he seems to be so fascinated by presenting the world with this fake image, but he doesn't want people coming to take his gold away. Because, like, if you look like you've got money, you're going to be a target, you know? And they think that they're coming here because this guy has lots of gold, and they roll up and his house is gigantic, apparently. I would think that would be something that you want to avoid. You're trying to keep your head down, you know? I guess it's supposed to be like in honor of him, and maybe it's part of it is supposed to be the joke that, like, his ancestor is supposed to be this giant liar, and here he is sort of like faking a giant house. But it was a weird decision that I didn't really understand in the moment, beyond just like, it's a funny little bit, you know? So Florian says, I think the Monkey Brothers made that facade. Why? Like, what were they trying to accomplish with it? Because they are big fanboys. Oh, is that all it is? I mean, all right. You know, it just does seem like an unwise thing to do if you're trying to not draw a lot of attention, but they don't really seem super smart, those guys. So, but anyway, they get off of their boat and they have, wandered around. We have Nami just trying to get Chopper digging all over the place because she really thinks that the treasure is just like buried somewhere here. And guys, Nami in this section, y'all know how much I love me some Nami, but she is out of control. She needs to calm down. She's like, Chopper's in the middle of digging in one place, and she's directing him to dig in another place, and then when he starts digging there later on, she's like, Chopper, what are you doing? Give it a rest. And I'm just like, oh, Nami. Anytime that gold gets mentioned, she perks up, and it's just like, what'd you say about gold? Girl, get a hold of yourself. So they stumble across the book Noland the Liar. And it's kind of like, first of all, his name is Noland. I watched this the first time with just the dub and no subtitles, and I thought his name was Nolan, because that's a name. I have a cousin named Nolan, actually. But no, it's Noland, and they just sort of say it like Nolan, you know? And it's a children's book, and we wind up getting this, like, this illustrated version of it here, where we've got this really silly sort of, like, I don't know what the word is I want. The illustration of this guy is sort of, reminds me of those, you know, those, like, stress figures that you squeeze and their head blows up a little bit because they're inflated and their eyes and their ears pop out when you squeeze them. That's what this dude in these illustrations looks like to me. So Sanji recognizes this. He says, where I come from, this is actually a famous story. And from the commentary that we wind up getting later from Cricket, I get the impression that, like, the illustrations that come with this are sort of universal. It's not, and that sort of, I wouldn't have thought of it, but for this universe it works. The way they're treating it in this world is more like, oh yeah, there was like a printer that printed 1 million copies of this exact same book, and we all grew up with like this book. Whereas what I was thinking was just that it was like a tale that was sort of passed down over time, told, you know, word of mouth, and then eventually was put to the page and illustrated. But instead, what I'm sort of imagining, it's like the rainbow fish. Do you guys know that story? Or the Hungry Hungry Caterpillar? Just like one of those children's stories that everybody got the same version of that book. Everybody knows exactly the look of the drawings in Hungry Hungry Caterpillar. By the way, rainbow fish is a fucked up story and I hate it. It's like the Giving Tree. That should not be a thing we're teaching children, but whatever. Okay. So the whole thing with this guy, Noland, is that he was an adventurer, and we see this like sort of weird thing that is sticking up off his head, which his ancestor also has. And I kept on being like, what? I thought it was like a weird hat, or he had done something with his hair. And then when we meet this guy later, I'm like, that just grows out of his head, I guess. It sort of looks like an upside down hazelnut. Luffy at one point calls it a chestnut. It looks more like a hazelnut to me, but it just truly does not matter. The thing that I appreciate about it, though, is that the look of it is so weird and distinct that if all of his descendants had this going on, there's no lying and pretending that you're not related to this guy. Because evidently everybody like knows that this is a thing. So that kind of, because there was a moment for a second earlier, or not earlier, I guess it's later, when Cricket's like saying, do you know what it was like growing up and everybody knew that you were related to him and they wouldn't believe you about anything and they would make fun of you. And my first instinct was to be like, why did people keep his name? Just change your name and pretend you're not like part of his heritage. And then I realized like, oh, right, they have this thing that you can't hide. So this happened 400 years ago. There was once a man by the name of Mont Blanc Noland who lived in the North Blue countryside. He was an explorer who always regaled the crowds with his stories of his incredible exploits, but nobody knew whether or not to take Noland's tall tales seriously. One day, upon returning from yet another adventure, he reported to his king all that he had seen. I saw a city of gold on an island in the great sea, and the courageous king declared that he must have this treasure for his kingdom. I love that it's called the courageous king. It just really like kind of hammers home that this is fucking propaganda, because no. This is a very greedy king who just wants gold, and then he gets mad that this guy can't give him gold and kills him. So fuck that king. So they take 2,000 soldiers and they go out in this ship and they deal with, monsters and storms and whatnot. And the animation for this, while extremely simplistic, is pretty fun. I really did enjoy it. And eventually when they get to this island, there's only 100 men left, and it's just an ordinary island and there's no gold. And he is sentenced to death, and he keeps sticking to his story that it really did exist, but that something must have happened to it. I can only assume the city of gold sunk into the sea. The king and his court were dumbfounded. Nobody believed Noland anymore, and the last of his days were spent in shame and ridicule before his sentence of death was carried out before a cheering crowd. So many things to talk about here. One, obvious resemblance to Usopp. And I love that this is something that keeps coming up, and Usopp keeps being like, why are you looking at me like that, Luffy? Why are you, I'm not Noland. Why do you keep looking over here when you're talking about him? That was very funny to me. Also, this is one of those things where part of me wants to be like, it doesn't make sense for somebody to lie about this and then go along for the ride to a place that doesn't exist with 2,000 people and the king, because they have to know that is not going to end well for them. However, the thing about people is they do stupid fucking shit all the time. And there are so many instances of somebody knowing good and goddamn well a thing isn't true and continuing to stick by their story despite the fact that there is demonstrable evidence in every other direction other than the story they are telling everyone. So the idea that somebody would lie and then keep sticking by it is not wholly unbelievable. It's just it's unfortunately kind of a human thing. I would prefer to believe that that's not what happened. But it's, guys, have you, you guys, have any of you watched those documentaries about the Fire Festival and what happened with the Fire Festival? There goes an example on a large scale of people knowing good and goddamn well this event is not happening. None of this is happening. You have nothing to offer. And yet they do not make an announcement and stop people from coming. They just let people fly in and then humiliate themselves with this ramshackle absolute nightmare. And they chose that instead of just canceling and refunding money. That's what they decided to do. Any time that I start to think a person wouldn't do that, I think about the Fire Festival and I take back all of it because I clearly overestimate people's motivations and common sense at every turn. Ryan says, doesn't that organizer still act like he didn't scam anyone? Ryan, if you watch one of those documentaries, they do a sort of follow-up. And granted, the documentaries are a few years old now, but the dude who organizes it still tries to maintain that it was other people's faults for mismanaging. And he got sentenced to another stint in jail because of credit card fraud. That he was selling fake credit card accounts, basically. So he's just a die-hard con artist and will never stop doing any dishonest thing he can, and he has no connection to reality in a way that seems genuine. So, personally, if I were going to lie about there being a place that's covered in gold, I would put this out there as a lie to the king, and then I would skedaddle, and I would not at all get on a ship and go with the king to find the place. But who knows? Maybe he was well, maybe we'll die. Maybe we'll just die, and then I won't have to worry about it. So that is the whole story. And then we jump over to Bellamy again. And I've just decided that I am going to have to grit my teeth and deal with Bellamy as a character. I was sort of hoping that something about him would grow on me a little bit, and that, you know, my feelings about him had sort of sprung from a kind of botched introduction that just didn't work for me and felt really like rushed and cobbled together, and that maybe eventually he would sort of settle into a place in my head where I was like, okay, here's what this guy represents. And unfortunately, the stuff that we see of him in these episodes just sort of made me go, I just don't think I'm going to like this character as a function of a villain. And I am prepared to take that back. I would hope to take that back. I'll say that. I would like to be able to take that back. But the thing is that this scene is a good example of how sort of like ungrounded he is. So he's talking about the story. I heard that fairy tale all the time as a kid, but I never knew that Jaya was the island where he thought he saw the city of gold. And his friend is saying, yeah, we always got told that if we lied, we'd be put to death the way that Nolan had from lying. So this is when he says it makes sense that Cricket's related to that fool, but I can't believe Jaya is the island from the fairy tale. And this dude chimes in. And I don't know if this guy is just some nobody or if I'm going to like need to keep track of him. He's wearing a weird sort of like baseball hat. And he says something about how Cricket is probably doing this like thing here on the island to clear his family name and regain some self-respect. And Bellamy, the thing that like kind of got to me in this scene was that he just laughs uproariously at everything everyone says. Now, granted, I've made fun a little bit of the whole thing with Crocodile and how long his laughter is during moments that don't really warrant it. However, him laughing diabolically still works in the scene. It's just that it goes on really, really, like, because the show drags things out. That's what it tends to do to fill time. So as much as I was just kind of like, oh my God, dude, can you stop laughing? It still felt appropriate. Whereas Bellamy just laughs in ways that I'm like, are you having the same conversation as everybody else? Why are you reacting like this? So yeah, this story keeps getting better and better. Can he seriously hope to wipe away 400 years of embarrassment by bringing back a few pieces of gold? What a joke. Sounds like he's a few bricks short of a wall. I mean, all right. I'm gonna leave it. Oh, Gus says his nickname is Bellamy the Hyena, so it kind of fits. You know what? If that's his nickname, I am willing to forgive a lot more here. Because, like, the whole thing with hyenas is that they are over the top with their weird laughter-ish sound. So, all right. You know what, Gus? You said, like, maybe one of the only things that could persuade me that this is something that sort of works for him. That said, I don't enjoy watching it because it's like, it just, again, feels like he's doing a whole different thing than everybody else in the scene. So this is when we cut to Luffy and he sees like bubbles in the water and he's sort of puzzled by this. All of this is happening while Nami is reading the story and says he never was able to prove himself to the people, and then says all he really wanted was to live the life of an adventurer. And for some reason, Usopp gets really mad and says, that last part's not part of the book. Don't try to tack on your sentimental nonsense. And I was like, why? I mean, that's like clearly feels like what's going on here, but he got so like weirdly mad about it. And this is when they get interrupted by Luffy getting pulled into the water. And this dude coming up, and he is wearing, first of all, he's barefoot. He's wearing almost what looks like track pants. They have like one of those stripes down the side. And it's like a pair of like a purple-ish track pants with a rope around his waist. And he has such a weird, setting aside the sort of like nut on the top of his head, he has a shock of blonde hair growing out from under that nut. And then he's got completely separate a pair of sideburns that are like disconnected from the top part of his head. And I have to tell you guys, yesterday I was picking out some artwork to post for the Song of Ice and Fire episode, and the episode had a scene with Tywin. And I was looking at some Tywin art, and this dude looks, if it weren't for that weird nut and shock of blonde at the top, he looks so much like a few of the illustrations that I found of Tywin. And I found that really like distracting a few times in this section. Let's see. Gus says, in the Japanese, what she says is something like, and he died with tears in his eyes, and he never got to become a brave warrior of the sea. It's another comparison to Usopp. Oh, I see. So he's taking it personally because it seems like she's really clearly like, but how, he is a warrior of the sea. Well, warrior, I mean, that's debatable depending on your meaning of the word, but like he is living his dream at this point. He got what he wanted, but nevertheless, that makes a little bit more sense. So Jessica says, I typed the same, glad I saw your comment before I posted. Yeah, everybody's mentioning this. It's very interesting because like for the most part, I really do think that the dub helps me like understand the joke and the characters a lot more clearly than doing the sub. But every now and then there's something like this where I feel like they kind of missed what was supposed to be the point of the line. So thank you guys. So this dude, in response to Sanji, and look, I don't appreciate him pulling out a gun. But I will say that this guy just jumps out, is like, what the fuck? I bet you're after my gold. And Sanji, rather than being like, hey, dude, calm down, let's talk about this, Sanji jumps up and runs over and just tries to kick this guy in the head. And you know what, Sanji? There is no reason to approach this that way. It's not helpful. It's not endearing him to you. And this is his house. This is his fucking, like, front lawn you're standing on. How about you just, like, back off and let him figure things out and try and, like, be a reasonable person? But no, Sanji doesn't do that. So in response, this dude yanks out a fucking gun and tries to blow Sanji's head off. And he is a remarkably bad shot. He has taken, by the end of this scene, something like 10 shots at Sanji while Sanji dances around yelling at him to stop shooting. And eventually he winds up just sort of passing out from out of nowhere. And we find out that he is suffering from a disease which for me, it sounded like the bends, and I'm not sure if that's the exact same thing, but what it is it's a result of continuous diving, that he was going down deep. The pressure from the diving would take a toll on his body. He would come back up to the surface and not let his body reacclimate before diving again. And this sort of repeated pressure and then reduction of pressure caused a chemical reaction in his blood that caused air bubbles. And so, yeah, it's like this sort of something that's like catching up with him. And I really liked that inevitably, first of all, he has a connection to these other two monkey brothers. But I like that he doesn't, you know what I'm talking about, guys. We have had characters who they get injured or they're suffering in some way, and our friends turn up and want to help, and that person reacts as if they're still a threat, even though our friends are like actively assisting in some way. And then you sort of have to sit through them eventually, finally coming around and believing that these people are like here to help. And instead of sitting through that this time, he wakes up and is immediately like, hey, sorry guys, I really overreacted, and obviously you're like decent people here. But yeah, this photo of him and the Monkey Brothers is so adorable. He's like a very, very large man, and they still absolutely dwarf him. So we get to see them. It's Masira and Shoujo. That is going to be so... I'm so bad at this, guys. But they are running towards him to visit because they say something like they hadn't heard about him. They haven't heard from him in a while. And they're coming to check on him. And they come running up to the house. And Chopper and Usopp both absolutely panic, running from side to side. Because like these guys have sort of been enemies, you know, and I say sort of because it's like they really didn't feel like true enemies. They were too affable, but they were in competition with our crew for, you know, whatever was going on, and they were not about to let up on that. But it quickly becomes apparent to these two that the Straw Hats are just trying to help. And Luffy is just like, hey, we're trying to help your friend, so I suggest either you lend a hand or find someone else to bother. And guys, there is this line delivery. I think it's Usopp who first calls them savages. But then Chopper follows up Usopp by repeating savages, but he says it in this way that I don't know why I found it so funny, but I fucking fell out. I'm gonna try. It's like just a really like, oh, don't antagonize them. They're savages. And then I'm sorry, I was just listening to it. Chopper just says, they're savages! Oh my god, that line delivery. I don't know why that got to me so bad, but it was just like, it's such a weird combination of like sheer panic and also it doesn't quite sound like Chopper exactly, you know? And also, not for nothing, but like Chopper, as somebody who has provoked this reaction in people yourself, I want you to be a little bit more sensitive. But the savages! I just fucking... That would be something that I would want to use for like a text tone, but if it was for someone that texted a lot, it would get extremely irritating extremely quickly. And these two like Monkey Brothers just begin crying and then just say, thank you guys. And then we cut to One Piece and Usopp's picture on the wanted poster pushing his nose up. I like the idea that he posed for a poster and just stuck his nose up in the poster and was just like, hey, just so you know, got a really big nose. Just in case you missed it. I'm having to sort of bend it to get it to fit in the frame. So, yeah, the Monkey Brothers sit down and they say, this house is the unofficial headquarters of the Saruyama Alliance of Jara. And they say, like, we call this home, but we prefer it on our ships. We like it. It's more comfortable. And the two of them, I'm just really glad, you guys, that we're getting a chance for our people to become friends with them. Because I did really like their vibes right out of the gate. And I loved how Luffy got along with the first one. And it just felt like they were too sort of like good-natured and chill to by as a bad guy that I would want our Straw Hats to actually defeat. I don't want them to do that. If they decide to sort of like compete for something, I can deal with that. But if we're going to get like a fight, I don't want to see these dudes get hurt. So I'm really happy that things have turned a corner now and we're getting to see them team up with our friends here. So yeah, they talk about Masira getting kicked off of the ship, and Luffy's like, "Oh, I'm sure you could kick his ass." And we cut real quick to Shoujo kicking Masira, and him going flying, and Shoujo being like, "Oh, he's right. I can kick his ass." So we go back inside and we talk to Cricket. This is when he apologizes, and he explains to them his position here. First, Luffy asks about Sky Island, and this dude begins laughing, the exact thing that Nami doesn't want, and is like, "Do you really believe that Sky Island exists?" And she almost comes at him like to punch him in the face. Usopp has to hold her back. And he says, like, of course it's not real. And all it takes is Luffy going, "Are you sure?" for him to completely stop laughing, grow pensive, and then be like, "I don't know. Honestly, this is so funny because, like I said, we have these characters that, like, just laugh so much at things. And then a second later, they're just like, well, I guess that could be true." And this happens a couple times within these two episodes, but yeah, this is when he starts telling them about the fairy tale and Noland and how he's related to Noland. I love Usopp. "Stop looking at me. My name's not Noland." And they realize about like the connection that he has and that he is out here. And this is like a sort of back and forth thing where he sort of he tries to say that I'm not doing this to prove that Noland was telling the truth because my life doesn't have anything to do with his life. But then it feels like that's very much what he's doing. You know, it's like I can't tell if I think he must just be in denial about the truth of what's going on. He says Noland, contrary to popular belief, was a very honest person. And I know that his last words were, "I can only assume the city of gold sunk into the sea." And that line's always accompanied by an idiotic face in the illustration. But he was no idiot. He knew what he saw, and I believe that he wasn't lying about it. Noland was sure the island he stumbled upon, where he found the ruins of the city of gold, was the island of Jaya, but when he returned, there was no gold. So he tried to say it had submerged due to the shifts in the Earth's crust. Everybody assumed that was just his attempt at an excuse, and then he died and his discoveries died with him. The truth is that his discoveries didn't entirely die with him. There is a logbook that he wrote in, and there's some, potential evidence in there, but we don't get that until a little bit later. And this is when Usopp kind of chimes in. "I get it. You're trying to find the ancient city of gold at the bottom of the sea to finally clear his name and prove Noland right." And this fucking guy just says, "Don't be ridiculous," and then shoots at Usopp. Sir, go to therapy. Stop it. "I don't care if the city exists or not. The actions of my ancestor have nothing to do with me and my life. You can't possibly begin to imagine what it's like as a kid, yada, 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 yada." And he says all of this, "I've dealt with this my whole life." And everybody just sort of gets quiet and leaves him alone. And he talks about a great many of my family have set sail to find the city and prove him right and restore his name. But all of them went missing. I was ashamed to be a member of such a pathetic family, so I decided to leave home and become a pirate. but his heart wasn't really in it. He didn't really want to do it. He just wanted for people to like not see him as the descendant of this particular guy. And he puts his own crew together so that people begin to actually respect him. And eventually they discover Jaya by accident. And he says, of all my family members who sought this place, it was I who found it. And basically, his crew is like, dude, the fucking gold isn't here. If you want to stay and pursue this bullshit, you can, but we're not staying with you. We don't want anything to do with it. And so they basically like maroon him there. It's not really marooning, like, you know, they do, but marooning for me always sounds like there's absolutely no way for you to get off the island. And this is like an inhabited island. He could get a ship or he could find a way off. But yeah, he says, I'm not here to prove him right or wrong. I have no interest in rewriting history. All I'm doing is following what I believe is my destiny. This is between me and Noland. I'm facing what I fear, and whatever the outcome, the act is all that matters. So, this is the thing where I kind of was like not entirely certain. If he's saying, I don't care if it's real or not, but I'm following my destiny, but he is trying to find it. I'm a little bit confused on his motivations here because it sort of sounds like, I guess what he's saying is like his destiny is just to search for it. Sorry guys, I'm moving something on my desk out of my way and it just like clanked. And maybe like the outcome is sort of secondary and it's just like his destiny as a member of this dude's family to also search for the thing that everybody else was searching for. But he says earlier that he was ashamed to be a member of such a pathetic family because everybody went looking for this and then disappeared. And essentially he's done the same thing where he like comes to this island. He believes that this is the island, and that remains unclear to me why everybody thinks that Jaya is the island he was referring to. I assume that there's some evidence for this, that maybe it was like marked on a map or something, but it's never actually told to us why they believe that Jaya is the island that Noland was referring to. And he completely believes that it is, and that finding this is like the sign that he has to stay. But like any of his family who he left behind will have seen him sail off into the sunset and never come back and do the exact same thing the rest of his family did. So it's just sort of a weird moment where he's like trying to assure them all that it's not about his ancestor, and then he is saying it's all about his destiny and his ancestor. And it was just sort of like a weird, I didn't really understand how those two things coexisted. Florian says, I think he wants to say he does this for himself and not for Noland. So Florian, you're saying basically that he's sort of in denial, that like it is kind of, he's claiming it's for himself, but it's like the same thing, really. Gus is saying he wants closure. He doesn't care about clearing his family name. Okay. So, Florian, are you saying he actually doesn't, it is really for himself? It's not denial. It's just because he wants to know. Okay. I guess I understand that. Like, it's the sort of thing that I have such a hard time imagining myself in his position and being like, but it's not about people believing me. I just want to know. Because let me tell you guys, if there was a 400-year-old legend that threw my family into a light that makes it look like they're a bunch of liars, I would be absolutely out here like extra, read all about it if I found out my ancestor was actually right. There's no way I am just going to like keep that to myself and settle down in obscurity, safe with the knowledge in my heart that the guy was right. No, everybody would hear about it. Everybody would know about it. I would be going from one corner of the earth to the other, like, suck it, bitches. You were wrong. He was right. Fuck all y'all. That would just be the way I handle it, because I have way too much pride. That's just it. It's like pride and vanity. It's just, it's not great. It's not great. It's a weakness. I admit it. So, and Usopp, what a sad story. And this is when we find out that the Monkey Brothers are just huge fans of this fairy tale. And when they found out that this guy was related, they were very interested in helping him for the fun, essentially. They found him 5 or 6 years ago, and they heard a rumor and set out to find him. Those two truly believe the City of Gold exists somewhere, and they're helping me find it. So, yeah, these two later on wind up agreeing to help our crew repair and reinforce their ship. But in the meantime, he is telling them about how, like, the ocean around this area that he has his house on is really, really deep. And they are diving thinking that there are maybe, like, relics underwater. And eventually he shows them some, which leads to a sort of, like, what do you call these missions? Fetch mission? Is that what they're called? When you're in a video game and it's like, yeah, you have to move on to the next step, but you can't until you, like, get a particular thing. Fetch quest? Is that the one I'm talking about? But yeah, that's essentially what it is later on. There is a gold bird relic, and all of a sudden the Monkey Brothers and Cricket realize that they're going to need one of these birds in order to orient themselves, because fucking compasses don't work out here. But we will get there later. So he gives the logbook to Nami at this point. It's a 400-year-old logbook. Upon departing from the Jolly Via, we left the harbor and sailed into the rising sun at a heading of east by northeast with the wind at our back. At midday, we happened to cross a bumboat carrying a rare island, a single-person contraption called a sky waver. And this can create its own wind, but it's like kind of hard to control. And his crew liked it, but he wasn't able to really use it. We were told the vessel had been manufactured on the Sky Island, and that more interesting devices could be found there. It brought to mind an explorer friend of mine who once showed me an unusual specimen, a living sky fish. I have never seen such a specimen in all my years. And this, of course, gets Sanji to look up and be like, a sky fish? Wait, what? One step closer to the all blue, perhaps? I don't think so, but there it is. So, of course, everybody is like, oh my god, so Sky Island must be real. And Luffy has this whole moment of like, well, let's go. Now that we know it's real, we should head out. And he has to be reminded yet again that we do not know how to get there. Meanwhile, outside, Cricket goes up to the Monkey Brothers and is like, hey guys, so I think that we should help these people because there's only one way to get there. And if we don't help them, they will die getting there. So I think that we should give them assistance and let them know what we know. But it's sort of weird the way that the episode ends is one of them says like, they'll die if they do it alone. And he says, I think we should help them along. And then they stand there sort of like punching their fist into their hands, which almost makes it seem like it's a threat. But we have then a cutaway to the greatest swordsman. What's his name, guys? The one who's got the fucking coffin boat and the green flame candles, and he's looking at the wanted posters and smiles to himself. That said, the next episode does not include him. So I was sort of surprised by that. I expected that we got him at the end of, because that's what sort of happens a lot of the time in the show, is that we will get the intro of a new big bad or just a new like major character at the very end of an episode. And when we start the next one, we will like have them actually enter the scene, and he doesn't factor into the next episode in any way. So I'm interested to see like what's going on with him, because we met him that one time. It was a span of like maybe 2 episodes that he was in, if that, and then gone again. Mihawk, thank you guys. So yeah, this is when he explains to them about Sky Island and the rumor. And I love when he says, "You'll have to decide for yourself if you believe it." And Luffy just goes, I believe it, before he's even said anything. Oh, Luffy. And he explains to them about that current that we had heard about from, what's his name? Bellamy? In the last section, where they, had mentioned about ships getting caught up in it and then eventually having to drop from the sky, and people thinking that means that there's like an island in the air, and it's not. It's just because of this particular weird current. So that is a way, allegedly, to get there. That starts by like some sort of alleged chemical reaction underground. It's the sort of thing that like, it's weird because he thinks that he knows exactly how often this is going to happen so he can give them directions later, but he also doesn't really believe that it's true. At the same time, if it is true, he's willing to help them like reinforce their ship, and I'm kind of wondering, is he taking a gamble that maybe it is real, but he never wanted to risk going himself? So if these guys go, he can just ask them to report back to him if it turns out to work out after all. The knock-up stream, says Gus. That's right. What a name. So this is when he talks about the darkness that can overcome you because of an extremely high-level cloud, and that it's like a solidified... This is just... It's so stupid, but it's fine. The cloud is called cumuloregalis. It forms high in the sky, has no internal air currents, and never turns to rain. No light can reach the ground. A sunny afternoon turns black as pitch. It's like some giant hand reached up and snuffed out the sun like it was a candle. Some say they're floating fossils, that petrified clouds that hang in the sky unchanged for thousands of years. And that this city rests on one of those petrified clouds. And Nami just goes, "Are you fucking serious with this?" And honestly, I cannot be mad at that, because it sounds absolutely ludicrous. Like I feel like if you tried to tell this story to children, to literal children, they would be like, "I don't know about this." And of course, like, Luffy and Chopper immediately jump on board. The conclusion that he comes to here, though, he says, Mystery Cloud sums it up as well as anything else, I guess. There's only one place this Sky Island can be if it's real, and that's on top of one of those clouds. Which, why is that the only place? And also, if that's what was going on when everything went dark for them, wouldn't that be visible in some way as a shape obscuring the sun? Because that's what he's saying. Like, it blocks out the sun. There's just like, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't. So this is when he explains about the current, and they realize that their ship absolutely cannot take it, because this is really, really dangerous in the best of times. Like, it's still going to be a huge risk, even if they have a ship that's been sort of salvaged is not the right word, but a ship that has been reinforced. It is, Usopp has taken it kind of personally a couple times now when people have brought up that maybe the Going Merry needs to be replaced because they can't keep saving it. And I don't know if it's like going to be, because like what I keep thinking about is that they have hinted about maybe replacing the Going Merry, and now these guys are saying they're going to reinforce it. Is the reinforcement going to make it look like the same ship, or is what they do to reinforce it going to give it a completely sort of different design? Because I was saying I would be interested to see an upgrade from the Going Merry. I would be fine with a different ship, you know, just for the change, just for something new. If we're going to be stuck with it for longer, I would like it to look a little bit different, have something to sort of mix things up a little bit. But also, I can understand if there were people who did not want that, because there's a sort of comfort that comes from knowing their ship really well, you know? Gus says, when it went dark for them, the sky was cloudy. Was it? I thought that it was just sort of like, wait, what happened? But I'll go back, and you might be right, Gus. The main thing that I remember is like the giants that appear. And this fucking guy is just like, oh yeah, you saw the giants. We'll talk about that later. And then he does not mention them again this episode. But yeah, so at this point, he agrees that he's going to have his friends help and update the ship. And then Usopp basically accuses him of something nefarious because he's offering to help and he's not asking for anything in return. And honestly, I was thinking the same thing. So Usopp winds up going up to this guy and like apologizing for not believing him later. But personally, I was wondering if there was something else happening as well, you know? So we eventually, like, this winds up sort of resolving itself. Cricket just says, I love Usopp, do you want to fight me? Masira says, whenever midday night occurs in this area, a cloud appears in the southern sky the next day. So he explains the timing, and he's like, yeah, so about noon tomorrow is when you guys are going to be able to, like, hop on this. And all of his explanation just makes Usopp feel like kind of a dick. They wind up having a party. And I did really appreciate that later on, he says, come to think of it, maybe we shouldn't have had that party. Because I'm like, you just said they have to be ready at noon tomorrow. And that ship is sitting there unreinforced. And y'all are just chilling, drinking, eating. What are you doing? And sure enough, they're going to have to like work through the night. And so this, oh, that's right. He says the last words in the logbook are, the skull's right eye. That's where I saw the gold. The same day Noland was executed. I still don't know what he means by that. Does it refer to the name of a city, a landmark that used to exist? And then, or just a poetic allusion to his own impending death. But this is when he talks about diving and finding various pieces of gold, gold ingots, gold statues, and he brings up the bird statue and starts describing the significance of it, and then realizes, oh shit, you guys are really going to need this in order for us to find the, for you to find your way due south. So this leads them to that fetch quest to find the bird while him and the Monkey Brothers, I was just going to say the Monkey Brothers, but he's helping them out. Cricket's going to do it too. Work on the ship. And he's just like, you guys better get out there and not waste any time. So what we get then is a pretty fun series of like, first of all, we get another reference to the fact that Zorro has no sense of direction, which I thought was really fun. I just really like Zorro's flaw being that he gets lost easily. It's such a weird flaw. You know, it's something that I don't feel like I've seen for a character before, but honestly, there are just people like that who have no sense of direction, and it works for somebody like him who's like really useful as a fighter, but also he's not in the right place a lot of the time. It's a good way to sort of get him out of the way so that there's not always an easy solution to a fight because he's in the wrong spot. And then we also get this thing with Nami finding like a giant tarantula on her, and Usopp, who's afraid of everything, is absolutely unfazed by this and is just like, oh, look at this cute little spider. Why are you being so mean to it? And Zoro's walking around with Nico Robin, and he cuts the head off of, or just kills a centipede. And Nico Robin says to him, you don't have to kill every living thing that we come across. It's kind of rude. And that is one of my favorite lines so far this show. It's my favorite because of like just the delivery. She's just kind of like, she's not hugely disapproving. She's just kind of like, man, fucking what is your deal? And Zoro gets really defensive, but he seems to sort of like hear her. And then she advises him to avoid the quicksand, and he just immediately steps into that shit without paying the slightest bit of attention to what she just said, which truly, quicksand in children's stuff, it is so funny because like it's so not a thing, but like as kids I think we were all convinced it was just going to be a thing that we ran into eventually. I love quicksand, the whole concept of it, the life of its own that it took on. What a wild concept. Somebody really ran with that and it just caught on. So, yeah, everybody's still out in the woods searching for this bird and dealing with their own, like, you know, Sanji and Nami really cannot deal with the moths and the centipedes behind them. Personally, I fucking hate moths. I'm on the record in several different podcasts saying how much I fucking despise them. I think they're gross and creepy. But Luffy and Chopper are just picking up bugs, and they are totally excited about like the prospect of people collecting them and them being sort of like interesting and valuable. And it sort of surprised me a little bit because I would think that Chopper being like medically trained, that bugs would be a significant part of that, because you have to know like what's poisonous. Sometimes insects can have like properties to them that actually make them a good ingredient in medicine. But yeah, it's fine. So they are talking, like looking at all of these different beetles, and he's getting very distracted by catching them instead of catching the bird that he is supposed to be finding. And the bird itself is pretty dope looking. It's like bright magenta and has like lime green and yellow on its beak and stuff. And it's right above their heads, but he does not notice it. And eventually a hornet's nest crashes to the ground, and they wind up getting quite stung, and they look like hell. This is like a moment in Animal Crossing. Oh my God. I love that they get away. They've just been stung, and then another one lands. There's a real suggestion here that the bird is actively dropping these on them to get them to leave him alone. So I don't know if that's like the Chopper has leapt to the same conclusion as well. But yeah, Chopper, oh, that's right. I forgot, because Chopper actually gets the words because he can understand animals. So yeah, this is when he says, I'll kill anyone who disturbs this forest. And I'm like, big words from somebody who's disturbing the forest by dropping hornets' nests all over the place. But all right, bird, I suppose. And then we get the very end moment where Bellamy turns up on the island and he is determined to try and get like whatever fucking gold he thinks there is from Cricket and the Monkey Brothers. And Bellamy is like not impressed by these giant men, these giant monkey men, and mocks Cricket. The story moved me to tears, but stealing a man's treasure moves me even more. I'm a pirate. Ha! He says, ha! And then yanks his coat off and just says that he's the hyena and sticks his tongue out. And that's the end of the episode. And I really can't help but LOL at somebody who handles anything this way. Just saying, I'm a pirate. Yank your jacket off. The hyena! Ha! 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 Sir, what are you doing? I want to know, like, does he have an actual devil fruit power? Because it's been mentioned, but I don't feel like we've seen anything. What's going on with him? What's his deal? I don't like this guy. I'm just going to say it. I don't like it. And I don't like that he's fucking with these people who are now our allies. Especially while they're supposed to be doing something to help the ship. Because we need that. We need the ship help. So, just saying. So, yeah, that's the end of the episodes. I'm over time, so I really do have to... I'm always over time. What am I... Never gonna not be. But, yeah, this is promising. I'm excited about where this is heading. So, I am going to wrap up. But thank you again to Michael via Florian for commissioning this episode. Appreciate you. And I'll be seeing you guys again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.